Are you one of the 9 million Floridians living in a community managed by a property manager or HOA? If you've ever wondered what your rights are as a resident or what your role is as a volunteer board member, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Condo Coaches, your resource for when your gated community starts to feel more like you're stuck behind bars, or when that guy next door decides that a hot pink Chevy on cinder blocks really sets the tone for the neighborhood. The Condo Coaches is brought to you by lmfunding.com. Find the Condo Coaches online at thecondocoaches.com. And now your host, Johnny Torres.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. From anywhere, everywhere you may be doing so, it's the Condo Coaches radio show. We're a team of volunteers here sharing our expertise to help you run your community, condo, or homeowner association effectively, efficiently, and on budget. We bring this show to you every week with experts from all walks of life, and we talk about all the things that help run your association and obviously things that you can do to run your association and help your community do better and be a better place to live. As always, with me, head coach Dean Akers. How are you, sir?
Good, Johnny. How you been?
Doing great. Had a nice quiet weekend. No complaints here. You?
I had a quiet weekend, but had a great week last week. We did our first Condo Coach continuing education program.
That's right. How'd it go? Tell me about that.
Well, it was insane. It was very engaging. It's the life and day of a board member. So we had board members and property managers there because it's 2 continuing hours for or continuing education hours for the management company people.
Okay.
At the end, we surveyed them. Out of 5 stars, we got straight 5 stars from everybody.
Awesome.
We talked about a community vision plan, which we've talked about it on the show. Every single person wants a community vision plan. Everybody loved the financial review, so it was way better than I ever expected. In fact, our guest and I had lunch today, Mark, and we were talking about how this could be a great platform to get out in front of associations to help them manage more responsibly, but more importantly, these subtle communication things.
Yeah.
And the thing that came out of it, every single person came up afterwards and said, your promise of one thing that I could take home that would make me a better board member was met.
Was what?
Was met. So we promised.
Oh, yeah.
We said, if we give you one item that made you a better board member,
right,
then were we successful?
Got it.
And everybody said yes.
So you met that expectation.
Yeah.
Well, and I know, we did a little bit of a promotion on this on our Facebook page to kind of let people know it was happening, but obviously being the first one, you want to make sure that you also have a smooth one. So you don't want to do a big thing and then maybe have some bumps along the way. So we did do a little bit of promotion on this, but this is something we're going to be rolling out all across the state.
Well, it's funny. As soon as it happened, I got a call because I'd been telling a gentleman about it up in the north that organizes association trade shows across the state.
Okay.
He called down and said, would you send me that thing you were talking about? I emailed him the actual handout.
Right.
And he called me back. He said, can you do all 6 shows in October?
Oh, wow.
For the trade shows.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you'd love doing the trade shows anyway, so.
Yeah. Everybody loves trade shows.
Yeah. Well, and it gives us a great opportunity also to meet a lot of the people that we're helping, people that are benefiting from maybe who haven't reached out to us, but are benefiting from this radio show week in and week out to make their community a better place.
Well, I'm sure Mark's going to talk about it. He and I had a nice visit early on, and of course he is a lobbyist that works with us too and stuff. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, teaching these board members communication skills, some subtle finance skills, because they're afraid to ask, because they don't want to act like they don't know, will help the entire industry. So we're looking at this day in the life of a board member, not so much at teaching somebody how to buy insurance or anything, but a real fundamental building foundation for board members.
Well, I think it's easy for people to forget that being in an association and certainly being a board member in an association is really an industry of its own.
Yeah, and I took a class that they require board members to take, the 2-hour deal for board member orientation. It was a great class, but it was about law.
Right.
It didn't teach them about finance, didn't teach them about communication, didn't teach them about meeting decorum, didn't teach them about leadership. And this 2 hours is focusing on that other set of core values that they need to have.
Well, and those are the things we talk about every single week here on the Condo Coaches. And it's also a good lead in to remind people that they can go on our website, download our 6 booklets on how to be a better board member. They are called our playbooks. So if you go to the condocoaches.com/playbook, that's the condocoaches.com condominium.com/playbook. You're going to find a form to fill out just to let us know you're a real live human being. Once you fill that out, you're going to get the opportunity to download all 6 of our free booklets, and they cover such topics as the top 10 things you need to know if you are a COA or an HOA board member, understanding your community's finances, collecting delinquent association fees, also how to run a meeting, right?
Yeah.
How to run an effective meeting. And so we're up to 6 booklets now. We're working on our 7th one, which is actually going to be a little bit more from the resident's perspective.
Right.
But nonetheless, these handbooks or playbooks have been incredibly useful for those people who've come across them. And we also get requests for the hard copies. So if you download the digital ones and you like them and you're like, oh man, I need to give each of my board members a copy of these, reach out to us and we'll send you those hard copies. The way you can do that is by emailing us. You can email us help@thecondocoaches.com, help@thecondocoaches.com, or you can call us 813-331-5415, 813-331-5415.
And we've eclipsed the 5,000 hard copy printings.
Yeah.
So we're sending them out all the time because people are downloading the PDF, but they're sending. Now we had the other day at this meeting, they go, can you send us 6 copies of the 6 copies so I can give all my board members?
Yeah. We're talking about 36 books there.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's starting to add up, Dean.
Hey, you know what? Thank God for underwriters. Our underwriters who remain kind of nameless, although I help, we have a big support group to help these condominium associations, both the boards and the residents, and we do it at no charge, and we do it with no agenda other than to give back like they give back.
Well, and soon enough, I mean, it's going to be an encyclopedia series that we're looking at, but that, again, it goes to show you the amount of information that someone really needs to know to be sitting on one of these boards in your community association.
Yeah, I was shocked, I was shocked by when I asked the questions on the finance of the group that we met with this past week for the class, how many of them did not know. But when I got them to be honest, they were willing to listen. And we went through some basics. Every one of them came up and go, man, nobody's ever shared that with us.
Well, I think we said it early on when we first kind of started doing the show, but we haven't really put it in this perspective in a long time, which is that you are running a small business.
Totally.
And I don't think people truly understand that when you are sitting on a board, you are essentially running a small business. There's communications involved, which equates to marketing, right? There is also a lot of legal things that go into play. There's obviously money at play between collecting association fees and making sure that you've got more money coming in than you've got going out. It's a small business, and in some cases, a medium-sized business, depending on what kind of a budget you're working with.
Right. It really is.
Yeah.
And that's, we have Mark. Mark, there was we had at lunch, we were talking about this legislative session, how the more associations aren't kind of accountable for all that and understand it, the more his team up there gets involved in changing laws that can have impacts. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Well, on that note, let me go ahead and introduce that good-looking guy sitting next to Dean Akers. That is Mark Anderson. And, sir, you are a lobbyist in the homeowner association industry, right? Because, again, it is an industry. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining us. Of course, we've been talking about this, I think, over a span of maybe about 3 episodes or so, just kind of teasing it. And then we went into a little bit of the legal side with Candace, who is one of our condo coaches. And of course, we came here to get a different perspective on really what took place in Tallahassee this past legislative session. But before let's kind of set the tone. We don't see a lot of legislation typically, right, in regards to homeowners and condominium associations.
Well, it's good to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. We do see, unfortunately, a lot of legislation filed every year.
Okay.
What you don't see, or most of those bills, thankfully, do not pass the legislature.
That's what it is. Okay.
We work to try to prevent a lot of the bad bills from impacting the universe of community associations. But just by way of just background a little bit, I represent a group called Chief Executive Officers of Management Companies, called CEOMC, and they are the management profession in Florida. They represent more than 18,000 community association managers across roughly 14,000 community associations in Florida.
Wow.
And we've got about 5.5 million homeowners living in communities that are managed by companies who belong to CEOMC.
So according to our estimates, that's a little over half
right.
of all residents living under an association in Florida.
Right.
That's amazing.
And Florida is, and this is why your show is such a good outreach and resource, is the number one state in the country for people who live in a community association. So it's a big deal.
Well, you know, as we've often talked about, I think it also gives us a really good perspective as to some of the issues and problems that people are also dealing with at a national level.
Yep.
We have people all over the country that listen to this show, be it a podcast version, be it online, and of course those stations that are carrying our radio show. But there is a need for this kind of information, and there's nobody else doing it. I mean, you know, we search, and I constantly search to see what other kind of people are maybe dispensing this kind of information, and it's rarely found out there. But yet, I mean, you're talking about millions of people throughout the country who live under these associations, and most of them, I would say, are probably not properly equipped to run them.
That's right. You were talking about the bills that were in Tallahassee. We had some legislation that did pass this year, but thankfully most of it did not pass. But by the time it's filed as a bill, it really is a breakdown of the fact that there isn't enough of the kind of resources we're talking about with Condo Coaches and Dean and this program that condos and HOAs and their board members are availing themselves of.
The awareness, right? The awareness is a big component of it.
It's huge.
And rallying those individuals who are going to be affected by this to take action on that legislation.
And if you think your association's run poorly now, just let a bunch of politicians take control of it and just see what it looks like after
That's
that.
absolutely right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Mark Anderson, our guest for today. Again, he is our guest coach today, talking from the lobbyist perspective on the legislative updates, changes that took place, the laws that are now in effect. Thanks to those in Tallahassee, we're going to be picking that apart in terms of all the new laws that were passed. I think it was a handful of them, right? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, head coach Dean Akers with us. If you want to be a part of the show, 813-331-5415. You can email us help@thecondocoaches.com or visit us on our website, thecondocoaches.com. Coming up, we'll tap into our mailbox and then start our topic of the day. Segment 2 coming up right after this.
Contact the Condo Coaches online at thecondocoaches.com. More of the Condo Coaches is coming up next.
Attention men under the age of 35. You know what really impresses the ladies? When a guy has a few drinks and later gets pulled over for buzz driving. That could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. There goes let's grab dinner and a movie. Oh, I know. You drive more carefully when you're buzzed. You've proven that hundreds of times. A woman admires that kind of confidence. And you've practiced how to speak if a cop does pull you over. Slowly, clearly, and politely like, "Good evening, officer." A woman admires that kind of foresight. And what woman doesn't find it adorable that you call it buzzed even though the law calls it drunk? You could kiss $10,000 goodbye, along with any chance of having a girlfriend. Because nothing says, "I'm a catch," more than a guy who lives in his parents' basement and calls it my place.
Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving. A message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the Condo Coaches, online at thecondocoaches.com. Here's your host, Johnny Torres.
Hey, it's segment 2 of the Condo Coaches radio show. Thank you so much for listening anywhere, everywhere you may be doing so. And the reason I always say that is because you can watch every single episode of the Condo Coaches on our website, thecondocoaches.com. You can also catch us on YouTube or Facebook. All you got to do is search for The Condo Coaches. This is episode 35. So
wow.
Incredible amount of content out there, videos with that most likely will answer the questions that you have pertaining to your community or your association. And again, Facebook, YouTube, great place to catch all those episodes. But my favorite is our podcast version of the show. And you can catch that on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Overcast, all those great podcasting platforms. Feel free to subscribe, whether it be to YouTube or any of the podcast services. That way you don't miss a single episode. But you can also go back and even from episode 1. You know, we're coming up on a year already. It's crazy, but it's been a lot of fun. So thank you again to everybody listening, be you a resident, board member, or even a property manager, because we know you're out there, and we really appreciate all the feedback we get on every single show. Joining us, Mark Anderson, lobbyist to the associations, and head coach Dean Akers. Before we kind of get on today's topic, we wanted to bring in this question that we got through our website at our email address, help@thecondocoaches.com. It says, "Hey, Dean, I was wondering if you're aware of any statute or rule that prevents associations from placing reserves in CDs at a credit union. One of the board members said it's illegal to use a credit union, but he can't find anything stating on that. And since deposits are insured, it seems like it should be okay. Thank you, Matthew from the Oaks of Country Club Condominiums." They are also going to be, or we're already working with them. They're looking for a financial assessment on their community. So thank you, Matthew, for reaching out to us. That's a phenomenal question.
It's a good question, but I think the legality of it's less important as a coach as the liquidity of it.
Yep.
So if you want to get your banks to come by, we've had bank condo coaches on, get your banks to come by, have them compare, because some of the banks will be even more competitive if you're running all your deposits through them. So you just want to play them all out. You have to have it as good as your fiduciary responsibility. You should have it in a federally insured institution.
Right, which you said this credit union is.
Right.
And so I think that almost negates the issue about whether or not it's legal.
Right.
But again, we're just condo coaches. We're not legal experts. But again, as long as it's a federally insured bank of some kind, it should be fine.
Yeah, and if you're doing it with a banker that you have a relationship with, you want to make sure of what the prepay or execution or taking it back penalties are.
Yeah.
If they'll waive them, whatever. Because you can right now the difference in interest rates are minuscule, and making money on your money right now is almost non-existent.
Well, as we've talked before, there's lots of options out there, in other words, as to what to do with that money when they're just kind of sitting there in reserves. We obviously do encourage people to use that money to try to make some interest on it and, kind of build that reserve, as we've talked about when we've had association bankers on before. But again, maybe CDs are or aren't in your best interest, just depending with all the boundaries that come with it.
One of the things that's a pretty good return right now is if you have a good reserve and you want to do a big project, it's not all bad to leverage that reserve a little bit. So say you had enough money, it's not that bad to go ahead and say, we're going to borrow half of it because we can borrow it at such a low interest rate and we keep our powder dry. And you can say, but they're paying interest on money they have in there. Let me tell you what, rainy day money for a condo is godsend. So we're showing some of them where a little leverage would not hurt. The banks are saying, a little leveraging can hurt. We're going to give you this really great rate to finance this roof project, and you can pay. And then they guarantee it with their reserve money.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of techniques, but that's where they may want to get a condo coach financial assessment.
Well, and again, we're already helping them at least with the groundwork of that, and I'm sure we'll get to that credit union portion of that and make a suggestion that's going to be best suitable for that community. But I'm sure it's a question that some other communities have had out there. So what exactly to do with that money while it's just sitting there in the bank?
The biggest problem I see on financial statements is not what do we do to make money with our reserves, is the ones that are under reserved. So they're sitting there with this balance and they don't want to raise the dues. And then somebody goes, but we don't have enough money in reserves. They said, but we don't want to raise the dues. So picture you buy a condo, maybe in South Florida. You buy it, you go in, you move in, and 2 months later you get a $50,000 assessment. Yeah. Are you a happy camper?
No.
Condo's been there for 20 years. It should have had reserves. So that's what we see actually more than what's the better interest rate.
Yeah.
And you probably deal with some of that in Tallahassee.
And reserves are an issue because you have a lot of them that waive the requirements. So they're maintaining a lot of that as it is. So that's a problem. And it's a great solution, though.
Well, again, Mark, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. As we were kind of laying the groundwork for in the previous segment, we typically don't see a lot of these bills pertaining to associations kind of make it through the legislative process. We can go into a little bit as to why, there are so many factors that go into why that does or doesn't happen for a lot of these bills. But tell us kind of overall how you feel, just from a broad sense, in terms of the bills that did pass. There were a handful of them. Overall, do you feel that these were necessary, that these are something that were or maybe an improvement to the current situation?
I think net, it was a good year for community associations. We had a bill that has now been finally resolved relating to, and I can just tell the excitement on both of your faces right now. I'm going to say the word estoppel certificates.
Oh, yeah.
That has been a battle for 3 years that on behalf of the management profession, we've been really opposed to, and we found a way to strike a delicate balance on protecting, most importantly from a high level, the jeopardy a lot of associations would realize of increased costs to their homeowners, while at the same time addressing some of the problems of outliers that the realtors and the title agents had identified in that piece of legislation. And basically it came down to this. There was, when you buy a home, you order an estoppel certificate to inform you of all the past due fees and assessments you may have to pay for. That turned into a very political issue in which one industry said, we just don't want to pay the bill. We don't want to pay for it. And so we, for 2 years, were successful in defeating that. This year, we came to an agreement to address the concerns they had about what they had identified. The realtors were concerned about the amount of the fee that was being charged for an estoppel certificate. We, the management profession, typically are the ones who prepare that for communities that are managed. And so we agreed to a set of price caps and some other reforms to the way in which these certificates are provided, and the governor has just approved that bill, which is a huge victory for homeowners. Had prior versions of bills passed on that issue, you would have seen homeowner fees and assessments go up anywhere from 20 to 30%.
Wow.
So we were successful in carving out some of the bad things in that bill, passing it with the agreement of all the stakeholders. We saw a bill passed this year relative to some real bad acting in South Florida, not surprisingly, where they needed to clean up a lot of that down there. But there was also some collateral concerns we had about the damage done to a lot of the good actors in the state, most of whom I represent. That's an issue we can talk about a little later. And then a third bill passed, but was then vetoed by the governor relative to sprinklers and what buildings should have to retrofit their facilities with sprinklers and which ones should not. Is there an opt-out provision and so forth? So there was a lot of activity in those three bills, a ton of information that we could get into, but that's on a high level. I think it was a net positive for the homeowners this year.
Now, typically, where do you see these bills originating from? I mean, are they originating from the property management companies? Because, of course, each association is so independent, that there's no kind of industry type of organization, there for the associations themselves. So I'm assuming that some of this has to originate from property management companies. Where else do you see maybe some of these bills originating from?
They tend to originate from legislators who bring with them from their district either most of the time a bad experience with an association or a management company that they have interacted with, and they want to file a general bill that's going to just fix everything, or maybe take a shot. It's sometimes our job is really to react to a lot of what comes from the legislators to us, and to first ensure that no harm is done to the associations. And I found in recent years a growing volume of legislation coming out of Tallahassee that is very unfriendly to associations, that we spend an inordinate amount of time trying to take the bad things out and hopefully try to fix that problem that legislator, however well-intended it was, and it usually is very well-intended, to prevent the collateral damage to all of the good associations.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think every piece of legislation always has these unintended consequences that, again, while their intentions may have been genuine at the start of that particular bill, they don't factor in, all the other things that happen or that may not apply to their district, but maybe is an issue or maybe causes an issue somewhere else in the state.
We should have a booklet called Unintended Consequences. Because if you look in businesses that I've had in my career, or you look at even board meetings and stuff, there should be something for everything you think's right. You have to have an unintended consequence side that somebody at least thought about.
Right.
You don't have to agree, but at least thought about it.
All right, we're dissecting the legislative process that took place this past session when it pertains to community and homeowner associations. Joining us, Mark Anderson and head coach Dean Akers. When we come back, we're going to continue to kind of dive deeper, maybe pick apart the bills individually. It's the Condo Coaches radio show. Again, if you want to be a part of the show, thecondocoaches.com, thecondocoaches.com. Give us a call, 813-331-5415. Segment 3 coming up.
Contact the Condo Coaches online at thecondocoaches.com. More of the Condo Coaches is coming up next.
It only takes a minute to find out if you may have prediabetes, and you can do it at doihaveprediabetes.org. But you're probably not going to. Nope. I'm sure you've got a perfectly good excuse. Kids, work. I get it. You're busy. So what better time than now? Let's begin. Raise one finger if you're a man. Ladies, none yet. Oh, count in your head if you're driving. Now, 3 more fingers for everyone over 60, 2 over 50, 1 over 40, 1 more if you're not physically active, another finger if anyone in your family has type 2 diabetes, another if you've got high blood pressure. If you're overweight, raise another finger, 2 if you're very overweight, and 3 if you're really overweight. You've just taken the world's first audio prediabetes test. And if you're holding up 5 or more fingers, visit doihaveprediabetes.org or talk to your doctor. There's no excuse because prediabetes can be reversed.
Brought to you by the Ad Council and its pre-diabetes awareness partners.
Welcome back to the Condo Coaches, online at thecondocoaches.com. Here's your host, Johnny Torres.
Thank you so much for listening. Again, we've got our 6 playbooks that are designed to make you a better resident or a better board member of your association. You can download those at thecondocoaches.com/playbook, thecondocoaches.com/playbook. 6 playbooks there that are absolutely worth quite a bit of money because it's an incredibly valuable information there, and we've been able to help a lot of associations just providing them with that information. Again, check those out. They're free of charge. All you got to do is fill out a little form to let us know you're a live, living, breathing human being, and you can download them right there from the website, and then we also email you a copy. In case you don't have the time to download them right then and there, you'll have them where you can just download them right from the email that comes to you. We are talking today about the legislative process when it comes to homeowner associations and community associations, property management. Joining us, lobbyist Mark Anderson. Thank you again for being here with us today.
Good to be here.
So again, we to kind of reset the conversation. I mean, we're talking about legislation that does affect millions of people. I mean, we're talking about 9 million people is the number, right?
9 to 10 million, yeah.
That live under an association, and we finally saw some movement, in terms of these bills actually not only getting through the legislature, but now the governor has signed off on them. Of the ones that passed, I mean, we've discussed them all in previous shows. Which would you say was the most necessary and why?
That's a great question. I'd have to probably start with the estoppel bill, and a lot of people don't understand the ramifications of that. But if it had passed in its original version, there would have been a tremendous increase in the fees and the assessments that homeowners have to pay for in their daily lives. And it was buried inside of a bill that was being promoted and pushed by some very well-funded special interest groups who simply just didn't want to pay for the estoppel certificate. And the people who provide that estoppel certificate are their community associations or their managers. And so once we were able to get that addressed, I think we made a big difference, I think, in terms of providing certainty and predictability as to the amount that can be charged for that service, because it's a professional service. Yeah. And anywhere in the state, it will not exceed a certain number. And then there were a number of other reforms made in that bill. I would say that's just because of the fact that for 3 years we've been at war with others on this bill, and we finally ended the plane. And I know the legislature is thankful that we finally fixed that, because they were sick and tired of the word estoppel, as I think I am, and you probably already are after 2 minutes of hearing this. The second one that was probably more consequential, I don't know that it was. I still have my difference of opinion on it, but there was a bill, House Bill 1237, by Representative Jose Felix Diaz from Miami, that addressed a lot of really bad issues in Miami-Dade County that were highlighted by a grand jury report, which, among other things, concluded that that the statutes needed to be updated to reflect a way to enforce the law or to really just apprehend a lot of this bad behavior down there that was not being addressed for many years, in fact. And there's been a lot of, I think, we talked about collateral damage before. I think the concern moving forward into the next session is going to be, how do we avoid a lot of that?
And they probably won't know until next session.
They won't. But
some of these side effects from the legislation that was just put into law.
Right. There were issues there that, for instance, if in the original version that we took out, we made a lot of improvements to the bill. There's a lot of, though, very significant, serious concerns about that bill. As far as relates to like websites, it mandates every association, I think greater than 150 units has to have a website.
That's right.
That's a great idea for a lot of associations, and quite frankly, a lot of them are already doing that, but many more are not. And it's a cost. So anytime you place a mandate on an association, there's a cost attached to that, and the homeowners who pay the bills are going to end up having to pay that.
Well, we've talked about obviously some resources that would make that either cost effective or at no cost at all. But as you said, not everybody has the knowledge to be able to implement those things, and eventually have to hire either through their property management company or, through a third party, bring somebody in that's going to help them meet that requirement.
Right. There were some abuses relative to debit cards that were just an example that actually is in the bill. That the bill now, under the current law that was approved by the governor, bans any association from using a debit card, which I found
interesting,
which is going to be an impediment for a lot of associations to function day to day because of the abuses that were taking place in one part of our state.
Yeah.
We feel, quite frankly, that is probably not a good idea. We need to change that. And it provides, as far as we're concerned, in the operations of the day to day, that's a verifiable electronic paper trail of transactions and expenditures that can provide the kind of accountability.
You don't throw out the whole basket just because you have one bad apple.
Right.
And, again, I think it's just because of the dynamics being what they are down in South Florida, a lot of foreign investors, a lot of people from foreign countries, that, again, they're here. They don't, they come with a lot of bad habits, and that's my hometown. My family immigrated to Miami, about 40 years ago. And so, it is a whole nother, I joke about it all the time, but it's another country down there. And I think that's where, but I think it obviously helps prepare the rest of the state for, those kind of issues, where they may not be happening today, but they may be happening down the road as we continue to grow at just multiples in terms of population year after year.
Can I this brings up a topic which you and I didn't talk about. I've had boards request me because they thought there was improprietary financial whatever's going on. So they were like, I think we're getting embezzled or something. Knock on wood. So far, every financial analysis I've done has been houndstooth clean. It's that the boards did not know how to read their financial statements, which begs back to the other class I'm doing. And their management company did not go in and say, hey, look, the reason you have no cash is your AR is now $500,000. The reason you don't have cash is we talked about it, $150,000 worth of tax deeds that we just put on your balance sheet that you'll never collect.
And that's so important what Dean's saying. And we didn't talk about this either, but if we could have more of that kind of thing going on a local level, which if you think about a community association, it's the most basic form of self-governance in the country.
That's right.
And if we have people who are educated and prepared and informed of what their responsibilities are, we don't have to talk about the collateral damage of legislation. Yeah. Legislation won't be getting introduced that deals with a lot of this if we have more of those resources that people are availing themselves of.
Well, and again, you're punishing the entire state, essentially, for the acts of just one particular part of the state where these issues may seem prevalent. But I'm sure that, again, looking at the bigger picture, it's probably an incredibly small percentage of the overall associations and the overall issues that these associations are dealing with.
There was one other thing, John, I want to touch about, that it was one that did not become law. The governor vetoed it. It was House Bill 653. It was a bill that was designed to give some direction to associations who are more established or have older buildings, for whom there needed to be some direction on sprinkler retrofit. should our buildings have to have sprinklers in them?
Yeah, so tell me, again, might you have some of the background as to why this bill originated? It seems like an odd thing to have the government intervene on something like sprinklers.
It does. It's an issue.
We're talking like landscaping sprinklers.
No.
Oh, fire. Oh, I'm thinking, okay. I'm like, what are we?
Yards.
I'm like,
No, it's yes.
No, it is
but that's,
yards.
I'm like, what? What does the governor care what somebody's landscaping looks like?
Give it time. Tallahassee will find a way to mandate lawn sprinklers.
We've got to have lawn sprinklers.
I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Have you seen all the grass that's burned up?
You got to give it time. There will be a bill that will mandate lawn sprinklers before long.
I was like, if anything, that's water conservation at work there. That's not,
No, it was.
I couldn't have been the only one that, Well, maybe I was.
Well,
who knows?
I should have been clear about how I described it.
So fire sprinklers. I get that.
Fire sprinklers.
That makes more sense.
And it was an issue that for the statutes were not clear, and the bill intended to give some direction on who would have to do that. And if you wanted, as a community who could not afford it, if you wanted to opt out, here's the way you can opt out of that. And it's a big deal. The legislature's kicked the can down the road for years on this. They've not resolved it. Up until December of 2016, communities had a deadline by December of 2016 to make a decision. Do we do it or do we not? However, the statute didn't specify who was or who was not included with that group. And so the bill was introduced, and everybody signed off on that bill because it was something we felt was very necessary.
Sure. It's a safety issue.
It's a safety issue, but if a community wants to do it, here's how they do it. If a community doesn't or can't afford to do it, here's the procedure to opt out of it. It was very necessary for many years now in Florida to resolve that. The governor vetoed that bill because of, I think, concerns he had over, there was a fire in London, as you may remember, where people tragically lost their lives.
There was just one in Hawaii.
There was one in Hawaii just recently.
Yep.
So he looked at that, I think, is fair to say, and was concerned about some of the safety elements of whether or not he maybe thought everybody should have sprinklers in their buildings.
Yeah.
There, again, is an unintended consequence there that people can do it. They can do it. They should do it. If a community determines that they don't need to do it, and they've taken measures to deal with that, they should be able to do that. Again, it goes back to self-governance. I am on a high level a big believer in letting these associations determine their own destinies, and Tallahassee too often comes in with a one-size-fits-all approach to everything. So we've got to go back to the drawing board again next year and figure that out.
Well, and again, even though it's a common sense thing in terms of the safety and longevity of that property, the truth of the matter is that, Dean, you work with a lot of financially struggling communities, and we, see and hear about it all the time where maybe they just can't afford that upgrade or that assessment to meet those safety requirements.
Well, these buildings were built in a time when the codes didn't require a sprinkler to be installed in the building. So now we're changing the rules, requiring a retrofit, and the bill was established to have to strike a balance for those communities that just can't do it or have determined it just isn't necessary for them. And we're hoping we can get that resolved. That's been around for as long as I can remember being a lobbyist, and it's just never been resolved. And so we hope that maybe that'll get resolved this year or this coming year, which, by the way, starts in second week of September this year. So it'll be on us before we know it.
Wow. Well, and maybe there's a different way to approach it, more proactive way to approach it, where maybe there's an awareness campaign or an education campaign that, the state can put into effect where, it's just going to bring it to front of mind for some of these associations just to take a look at what they have in place and see if it's time to do that retrofit or that upgrade to a more current system for their fire precautions. So, very cool. Well, the one that I definitely want to talk about in the next segment is the term limits. That's a fun, fun one. We've had a little bit of fun with that. We'll get the details from you on that. Mark Anderson with us, a lobbyist for the association's industry, and of course, head coach Dean Akers. Yours truly, Johnny Torres, Condo Coaches radio show, final segment coming up right after this.
Contact the Condo Coaches online at thecondocoaches.com. More of the Condo Coaches is coming up next.
Life is full of bittersweet transitions. It's difficult to know how these changes will impact us over time. For some people, difficult transitions like retirement, divorce, or loss of a loved one can hit harder than expected and may contribute to feelings of hopelessness or even thoughts of suicide. The risk of suicide is even higher for men over 50 who served our country. Guys like me. That's why support from friends and family makes such a big difference. Every day, your actions could help save a life. Together, we got this. Learn how you can help save a life at veteranscrisisline.net.
Welcome back to the Condo Coaches, online at thecondocoaches.com. Here's your host, Johnny Torres.
Thank you again for watching, listening, or however you may be consuming your Condo Coaches content. Again, you can do so online at Facebook, YouTube, thecondocoaches.com if you want to catch a previous episode. We also stream it live on Mondays around 1 o'clock, so if you do want to shoot us a question live during the broadcast, you can do that as well. It's always fun to kind of watch the show as it happens. And then again, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Overcast, whatever your favorite podcast platform is. You can find us there. Just by searching the Condo Coaches, and it's another way for us to provide this incredible wealth of information to you and help you run your community association effectively, efficiently, and on budget. With us, Mark Anderson. We're talking legislation in Tallahassee here in Florida in regards to community associations, and of course, head coach Dean Akers, and we were of course talking about the bills individually. And I wanted to get to the one that I found the most interesting, and we've kind of had a little bit of fun with, but it was the term limits for the presidents of associations. Now, what's funny is that once we kind of got the final rundown on the bill, I know there was a little bit of I don't know if loophole is the right word, but basically this only applies to associations where the president serves a 2-year term. Is that right?
No, it's close. Where it's
Okay.
It's for board members, period.
Oh, so all board members.
For all board members. It's an 8-year term limit. It had been in the original version of the bill a hard 8-year term limit where you could not serve again. And we, through our advocacy, really didn't like the idea of term limits at all.
Sure.
Quite frankly, if you're doing a good job and want to serve as a volunteer resident of that community, you should be able to do that.
Well, and Dean talks all the time about how hard it is to get people to volunteer for these positions.
It's terribly hard. And you're absolutely right. It is very hard. As the management profession, our managers throughout the state have had that very same concern. And that,
I mean, you're not making any friends sitting on the board of an association. I mean, rarely.
Well,
I mean,
let's say you do make friends, but back to the term limit. Let's say everybody loves you.
Yeah.
The biggest challenge with it is you're a volunteer. And I've got people I work with Condo Coaches that put serious, real hours in.
Well, and we've even talked to, for example, there was someone who's contacted us a number of times who he's been the association president almost as long as he's lived there, and now we're talking like 15 years. And now this guy who's probably been doing a great job, which is why he keeps getting reelected, now may be forced out because of this type of legislation.
Let me close that loop because I want to make sure your listeners understand what the bill actually did. It has an 8-year term limit. It was a hard stop at 8, but then we said if you're doing a good enough job and nobody has decided to run against you, you can run again.
Okay.
You can also run again if 2/3. But let's say somebody wants to run against you, you can still run if 2/3. You've got 2/3 of the voting membership of the association.
So all the residents or owners,
of the association. If you secure 2/3, you're reelected.
Them saying that it's okay for you to run again.
Well, you can run again if you get 2/3 of the vote.
Oh, got it.
So it's a higher bar, and it was designed to address again some of the issues in Miami-Dade where you had you had some real problems with elections and voting and people serving on boards who were duly voted out, who should have been out, but then they stayed on because they claimed they were voted in, and it was a mess.
Well, they leverage, they leverage some of the influence that they have in decision making and that sort of thing to win these elections.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly see why, someone in that position might want to retain that. I mean, we've talked about, again, my family's down in Southwest Broward County, and where the board members are indirectly showing favoritism to their family members who own companies who are benefiting from those associations. Yeah. So landscaping companies and maintenance companies and that sort of thing. And they're sitting on the boards. So, of course, those family members are getting those jobs sometimes even without a bid process.
Well, we had some examples in the grand jury report of actual board members themselves getting the contract for various work that they were then overcharging for, and bid rigging to get. It was a mess. So the bill really was aimed at a lot of bad behavior down there that we think was very legitimate. There are some areas that I think we've got to clean up to make sure we don't.
So it's a soft 8 years.
It's a soft 8. If you're not opposed, you can run again. If you are opposed, and you can run again, but you as the incumbent have to get 2/3.
But the soft, but the length of the term doesn't factor in any way, whether it's a 1 year term or a 2 year term.
Normally it's a 2 year term on the boards I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
It's 4 2 year terms.
Is that pretty standard, or
it's pretty standard unless you have, but they just intermediate. You have one this year that's 2 years, one that's 2 years.
Okay, so
it's 4 2 year terms.
Got it.
Right.
And then at the end of that 8 consecutive years, if you don't have a candidate opposing you, then you're in. If you decide you want to run after 8 years and you're opposed, you've got to get 2/3 of the voting membership to vote for you. So it's a compromise. I'd prefer there not be any term limits, but again, we have to understand that he was trying to fix some problems down there, and we tried to work with him on it.
And is it still like a hard 8 years? Like, once, let's say that you aren't able to get that reelection by the 2/3 majority of the owners or residents, are you still, let's say if a term goes by, are you able to run again? Or
my understanding is it's a consecutive 8 years.
Okay, so if it is broken up, then
it's like the legislature. If you're out for a couple of years, you've served 8, you can stay out 2, you can run again, or you can jump to.
And it hits the reset button on your term limits.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So it's again, I think it's going to really weed out a lot of the stuff that was going on down there without necessarily impeding a lot of the way that hopefully associations run their elections across the rest of the state. Well, that has yet to be determined. We're hoping it won't, but we're
but I
keeping
think
an eye on
8 years
that.
is a good amount of time,
Yeah.
and certainly, I mean, I'm not any more in favor of the term limits than you are. But much like I'd say in Congress, I think there's kind of a need for them, where maybe we're not cycling through them as often as we do in the House and in the Senate here in Florida. But certainly, I think there needs to be just kind of this refresh button that we hit every once in a while, and maybe get some new faces, some new ideas, some new leadership.
And that's the basis of really what I think the bill was aimed at. Although it may fall short of that, I think what we all want to do is make sure that good people are serving on these boards, because that flushes out a lot of the bad stuff. And what I've served on a board, I don't know if Dean, you have, I'm sorry to hear that. But you serve on a board and you realize very quickly that the decision-making power is vested in 1 or 2 people on that board.
Sure.
And if you have the more people on there that are prepared, hopefully having gone through the condo coaches, who understand what the rules of the game are, the better I think the association is going to run, and the better outcome you're going to have at that level. Because you don't want a bill like this coming in every year, and we deal with the volume of this every year. I can't tell you, we probably had 36 bills filed this year that were very anti-association. Although they were designed to fix a problem, they would have had a really bad impact on the rest of everybody else.
Well, we talk about this every so often, and while I think the average resident typically, I would say, doesn't have a great feeling about their association, the truth of the matter is that the opposite of that, I think, is also not favorable to any of our communities. Because you of course get the inconsistency in the maintenance of the individual homes or the individual units. It just kind of becomes a free for all, and so it's about finding that happy medium where people still feel like they have some control and some ownership of their investment or of their home, and also making sure that there are some boundaries in place as to what you can and can't do with your property.
One of the things we're doing is Condo Coaches, and it's absolutely free. All somebody has to do is request it, and we've done a number of them, is electronic surveys. And we'll do it with their logo. We'll send it out to the email people in their association. And if you have 100 units and you get 20 responses, you have a statistical fact. In other words, you don't have to have all 100 call you up.
Right.
So, or answer. And so we're doing that. And these surveys, these boards, I ask them, when was the last time you surveyed your residents? Yeah. And the answer was never. I said, you need to send it where they don't feel like you're going to threaten them because you say they're idiots. Send this blind survey out through us, and it'll come back blind where you don't know who responded. and it's all
Johnny,
done.
people still want to live in a community. There's a reason why almost half of our 20 million population in Florida live in a managed community, because it's a great place to live.
Sure, absolutely.
It is. You have a better standard of living at a lower cost of living, and you actually can get, and your property values are protected. There's a whole range of advantages to being in a community association. But there's always that, when you get into self-governance, there's always going to be, it's very personality driven. And what we have found in the management profession, as I mentioned to Dean earlier, is that the ones that function, the associations that function better and best, are the ones who have a very healthy dialogue with their residents and residents with their board. And also on top of that, overlay that with things like the condo coaches, providing that kind of overlay and resource that they need to have to be prepared. Those are the ones that are the best. The ones that are the bad actors or get off the rail somehow, or people or boards that just decided they're going to disengage from their residents, or residents from their boards. If you want to change your community, run for that board, get engaged.
That's right.
And make a difference, because you can.
Well, and that's why we also tell the residents to download our playbooks and to listen to this show, because the more informed they are, the more likely they are to take on a leadership role, and the better understanding they will have of the board members who do run their association.
You bet.
So, got a few seconds left here. Do you think that sprinkler bill will come back?
Yes.
All right.
The lawn sprinkler bill.
That's right. Thank you, Mark Anderson, head coach, Dean Akers, for being on the show. It's another Condo Coaches show in the can. See ya.
You've been listening to the Condo Coaches, brought to you by lmfunding.com. Find us online at thecondocoaches.com and join us this same time next week as we help you navigate life in your managed community.